Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints Hour. Ottawa being slammed over a Canadian citizen stranded in Kenya for 3 months. A concert cancelled over the Kirpan. And now a lawsuit could be pending and a proposal to halt the creeping influence of the English language in Montreal. Stay tuned. And these are the issues we're presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. Ottawa is being slammed for not doing enough to help a Canadian citizen jailed for 8 days and stranded in Kenya for 3 months. Airport authorities in Kenya stopped her from leaving the country when they decided her 4-year-old passport picture didn't look like her. A Calgary venue cancelled a concert after a Sikh patron refused to surrender his Kirpan to security. Now the concert promoter is threatening a lawsuit. And a proposal put forth by a Montreal councillor to halt the creeping influence of the English language. Frenchisizing existing English street names are being called for. Now let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Paul McKeever is leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario, and Samshir Sidhu is an instructor at Centennial College and a host and producer for the Maharajas The Legacy, an organization promoting Sikh culture. And you, the viewer, are our third guest. Feel free to call in at any time with any of your comments about any one of the subject matters we're addressing today. Now let's take a look at that first one up on your screen. This seems to be the one that's gaining the headlines lately. Official identity loss. Now what this is referring to is a Canadian citizen stranded in Kenya. Now this is a Toronto resident, and what happened is that 3 months ago she was trying to get out of Kenya when they stopped her in the airport, saying that they couldn't let her proceed out of the country because her passport picture did not look like her. Now this is a 4-year-old passport, and the interesting twist on this was there was reference made to her lips. Now I don't know if she underwent surgery. It's not clear what happened or if somehow it happened to be a different looking picture. But the thing is, this lady made every effort to try to prove her identity, showing every available document she had in her purse, and still. Now, there was an insinuation made in another article talking about her angle, stipulating that perhaps these people were looking for a bribe. And when she refused to give the money, then that's when they started to give her the headache. But the bottom line is, this is a lady that spent 8 days in jail, 3 months stranded in Kenya, and her son is staying at a friend's house. A very traumatic incident indeed. Now, certain editorials followed. Some are saying, well, it was an issue of racism because Ottawa should have come to her defense. And in one other article, it was insinuated that because perhaps she was an African, a visible minority, maybe not enough attention was paid to her. Do you believe that was the case? But the bottom line is, do you fault Ottawa for not stepping in on her behalf? A very serious issue now being played up in the media, and she's due to come back home anytime because Ottawa did finally get involved, and it seems like she is coming home now after all. Now I'm going to be asking our guests what their analysis is of that particular story, and I'm going to start with you, Samshir, on this one.
Sure. I mean, I can't but hope to sort of personalize this because imagine any one of us traveling outside and having possibly denied entry or exit out of a country. And the way I look at this is just the Canadian consulate did review this sort of case, and they came to the conclusive evidence that this person was not a Canadian citizen. Even as you said, she had a Canadian passport, she had a driver's license, she had a health card, and she had her Shoppers Optimum card of all things, and also receipts from in Canada. So I mean, I was just wondering what that process was for them to come to that particular conclusion.
Very interesting. Paul, your take on this one?
Well, my first concern is that there's this politicization of who comes into the country, but also of who goes out. You know, to my mind, in her case, she had a passport. A passport should be a document that at least says this is a presumption that you're a Canadian. At that point, if someone wants to raise an objection or challenge it, that should be a matter for a judiciary, not for some politically appointed person in a foreign country, a Canadian in a foreign country, to just sort of decide. I think she should have been put on the plane, sent to Canada, perhaps put in a separate line. We could have a process set up in advance that says, excuse me, madam, but just until we verify that you are the person who's depicted in the passport, we're going to need you to entertain this or participate in this judicial process. It wouldn't have to be long, and perhaps with better biometric, fingerprints and that kind of thing. Quickly, yes, you're the same person, and off you go. But to have someone just say, you don't look like her because your lips are different size or because your glasses are different, which is, I think, what they said. Glasses? My goodness. That's ridiculous to me. And then he stamps it and he gives it to the Kenyan authority so that they can prosecute her. To me, it doesn't smell so much of racism, but corruption. It sounds like not only the Kenyan official at the airplane, but also something wrong is going on at that consulate. My suspicions, I would think. And as I say, it's a question of politics being where it shouldn't be. We have a fellow right here in Canada, Mark Emery, who in Canada would get charged $200 for doing what he did, which was distributing some seeds, some marijuana seeds. And the Canadian government is turning a blind eye and letting him be taken to the United States where he could face the death penalty. This is because we currently have a government who thinks that their electorate will not re-elect them if they defend this guy, and that's a politicization of what should be a judicial role. He shouldn't be leaving the country, and she should be getting into the country.
So what level are you blaming Ottawa for this particular case?
I think it shouldn't be in the hands of a minister like Stockwell Day to make this decision.
Right.
I think we need better laws that set up a judicial process so that the Mark Emerys of the world don't get set down to be killed, and that the Ms. Mohammeds of the world don't have to be held up for 3 months in a foreign jail.
What about this whole issue that was made about perhaps an issue of racism, that Ottawa is selective on who it deals with, in what regard, based on race? Do you buy that? Sam Scheer, do you buy that at all?
Well, yeah, I think personally looking at it at a face value is an easy topic to jump upon. I mean, you could always raise a situation like, what if this was, a Caucasian woman? Would this sort of same scenario would have come up? I think that's an easy sort of angle possibly that people will bring up. But I think the way I look at it is to add on to Paul's point, is that sort of the procedure that it was taken. Well, they have taken the right steps, and there seems to be a breakdown from the top level all the way down. And you have the Canadian government, the Canadian people saying, yes, citizens are protected, we are one of the most respected people in the world. And to have this come down to one of our own people, I think sends a bad message.
What about the Mexican woman last year? Well, it was a Canadian woman, the woman that was stuck in Mexico.
Oh, yes.
What about that one? I mean, obviously, we could always say, well, Ottawa should do this or do that on every case. But there's another issue here when you start looking at that particular country being dealt with. Yeah. Now, in this particular case, there was a suggestion. In fact, it wasn't even a suggestion. It was an outright statement that came from this lady that these people were looking for a bribe. Yep. And when she chose not to do it, that's when they cracked down on her.
Right.
Nations have their own ways of operating. And at times, we who visit those countries, and perhaps that could be our native country, get stuck in the middle. Yep. And where does that leave the Canadian government from that point of view in terms of intervening?
Again, I mean, to the extent that it's not a Canadian official being involved, where we had the consulate being involved in Ms. Mohammed's case. Yes. It's maybe a slightly different case. There you've got questions of international relations that have to be dealt with. If they think that she's violated a law of their country, then she has to go through their judicial process. But where it's just a question of, are you the right person? Are you the same person who's in this passbook? I think that's a Canadian issue, should be handled by Canadian judiciary.
I agree. I find it frightening because you look at what happened to this lady, and for anybody out there who's taking a trip and has their passport, suppose you do happen to look different. What if you changed your hairdo? What if you changed your hair color?
Right.
You wonder, well, am I going to end up in a jail? I mean, the fact that she's been out of the country for 3 months is bad enough, and her boy is in the care of somebody else. But can you imagine that happening to you? 8 days in jail? And these countries, they're not Canadian jails.
No. They're one meal a day jails with some bad water and abusive guards. Not that there aren't abusive guards in some of our jails, I'm just saying that it's pretty bad. But back to your point, though, about racism, the pattern in all of this is that because we've allowed these decisions to be political decisions, where elected officials are going out and acting instead of some judiciary body, that's caused the problem where we have elected officials who are afraid of for example, the United States. I don't doubt for a second that there was
Yes.
pressure on them to say, she might be a terrorist. If you are helping her out, you might be helping out a terrorist. And this exact same thing, they feel pressure with this Mark Emery I'm talking about. How dare you not release a marijuana dealer to us? What are you, pro-marijuana Canada? Canada has to stand up and show that it is a sovereign nation and not just a lapdog to the United States. And that's what I think as his government. And I think that's the problem that arises because of the fact that we allow these decisions to be political rather than judicial.
I still have concerns, though, about pulling the racism issue on anything that it could possibly be pulled with, and that's something I want to return to. But first, let's go to Betty on line 8. Hi, Betty, you're on the line.
Hi, two-point question. Was it actually a Canadian that arrested her? I heard that there was only actually one Canadian in that office and that the rest of them were Kenyans. And part two, what is a problem between the Kenyans and the Ethiopians? I heard they absolutely hate each other. I mean, there's murder in their eyes when they see each other. Could this possibly have been a Kenyan-Ethiopian problem, who the lady is? I mean, just like we have Sikhs in India and Hindus and Christians and Muslims who hate each other. So I heard that she was Ethiopian, and this is why she was held back by the Kenyan, not by actually a white Canadian.
Okay, you got some good points there, Betty. Do you want to address this one, Paul?
Well, I'm a big proponent of not believing anything until I have some evidence of it. So,
Yeah, you're a lawyer by trade, too.
yeah, I don't say it is racism. I don't say it is the bribery. I just say that there should be a judicial process to figure it out. You know, some people are racist. I don't think it's fair to say
But
that
we
all...
do know, though, at the airport it was Kenyan authorities at this stage.
Oh, at the
Yes,
airport.
so we know that, yes.
I don't know that we know that, you know, the identity of the consular official, though. I don't know that we even know the person's name,
Yes.
much less where they came from.
It's still unfolding, but what I find troubling is the knee-jerk reaction to jump and say it's racism. I mean, I saw one report where they started to pull things out of a hat and talk about Omar Khadr. I don't even know how it fits in, and talk about Arar. I mean, these things are still out there. Omar has a long history of his family of being involved in terrorism. So I don't even understand why anybody would make that damaging link to begin with. Right. But when fingers start getting pointed to Ottawa on being racist and so on, I mean, these could be private conversations going on in the kitchen. But when it starts to get to the public forum, I find it could be quite damaging, personally speaking, to the way, I mean, we're at an issue right now where we're facing even free speech has become an issue here. And do you not find when people start doing these types of things or even proposing things like this in the public forum with absolutely no proof, sometimes not even a connection, that it becomes very antagonizing in a sense and damaging to our political fabric and social?
Yeah, if I may, I mean, if this is a sort of a racism issue, then I'm also, as you said, the word frightened, because then how many other cases have there been where these individuals have been maybe detained for maybe a couple hours, maybe not so much as a week? You know, how many of these cases are there that are actually happening, you know, to Canadian citizens until, you know, the government actually gets involved? Like, what steps have we been taking? I mean, yes, this one has surfaced and is gaining power, but, you know, you raise the question, how many more have there been like this?
Right. For example, do you have to be a journalist to get some attention?
Yes.
And then, you know, we've seen journalists get featured when they're held hostage. That happens all the time.
Yes.
And so, again, I think it's a failure. We're putting too much of a workload on people who aren't really well suited for the job. You know, Stockwell Day, who intervened in this case, that's not really his job. He's a lawmaker. He's not a guy who's supposed to be calling foreign governments.
But when it becomes a public scandal,
that's when they have to do
starts to
something.
become very politicized, and basically, whoever the politician is at hand has absolutely no choice.
Which is why
it should never involved.
It would never become a public scandal or something that was being blamed on politicians if there was already a proper process to deal with these situations, and there isn't.
Okay, now actually we'd love to hear from you on the phone lines. I'm seeing a really interesting one up there. I'll tell you what, hold on, be patient. We're going to go for a break. We'll get right back to you on the phone lines after this. Don't go away. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line, continuing to talk about our first topic about Ottawa taking it on the chin over this lady in Kenya, Canadian citizen stranded in Kenya. We're going to go now to Christian on line 7. Hi, Christian, you're on the line.
Hello.
Hi, Christian.
Hi, good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. I would just like to ask, isn't there a possibility, because we are modern times and everything is high-tech, I would like to ask if there is a possibility wherein a portion of our passport we can put our fingerprints, because our fingerprints, it cannot be changed, but our face, it could change because of, there might be something in our face at the time, but our fingerprints is always constant.
Okay, interesting question, Christian. I'm going to turn this one into Sam Sher. You shared something during the break. Now
Sure.
tell us what it is.
Well, even with the fingerprints, they're not 100%.
This is something that you're into, though.
Yes, this comes from my
Yes.
research background. I did at U of T. The sort of the biometric science of it, our fingerprints do change between a 2 to 5 year period.
Now, how much do they change?
There is enough change there to make it invalid.
Wow.
There is a range there for it to recognize it, like maybe like a curve or like a circular in the thumb. There is enough change that happens, and you'll notice that too. You would need to update it, and
So that won't be reliable then?
No, it will be reliable between, like I would say, a 2 to 5 year period.
Okay.
Right? And I guess just like a photo, I guess that's why we don't change it every year, right? We're hoping that a person keeps the same features within a 5 year period, and then we go in and renew a passport. So. And I think you brought up the topic of retinal scan. Then we get into logistics. What's our feasibility going to be to store all this
Yes.
information and to process
True.
the individuals? So I mean, it would be an upgrade, but I think I would say that once again the responsibility should be the customs agent to take his due diligence,
Yes,
to look at all the
certainly.
evidence. As being a former customs agent at the Toronto airport, we take our time. We look at all the evidence, we question, and we come to a conclusion.
Now, these customs agents can be awfully corrupted depending on what country you're in, which, and we have to address this, the issue of Ottawa. As you go from country to country, you're going to find a different system of doing business. What do you think the role of Ottawa should be when it comes to one of its citizens stranded overseas? Do you not think there perhaps should be an immediate response? Or again, it's easy to look back,
Yeah.
but the feasibility of this, what's your opinion on that?
I think there are far too many cases for a politician
Yes.
to be dealing with at any one
Perhaps
time.
more than we realize.
Right.
It's just that cases like this, because the woman spent 8 days in jail and 3 months overseas, this is the one that makes it to
Yeah.
the forefront of the media. But it doesn't mean that there aren't tons of them behind the scenes that we aren't aware of.
Correct. And I think for that reason alone, there needs to be a proper and efficient machinery so that it's not a political problem and it's dealt with automatically. Nobody should be held up by the consulate in some foreign country, the Canadian consulate in some foreign country, from getting on the plane. If the only issue is not, oh yeah, this is a genuine passport, they agreed it was a genuine passport, they just thought that she wasn't the one who should be holding it. That's something that should be done in the country, not something that a person should be sent to prison for.
Yes, and we certainly don't have any sovereignty over these other countries. You see, that's what I find very disturbing about this whole thing, because there doesn't seem to be an apparent solution. And when there doesn't seem to be on the surface, we immediately point fingers at who the closest person is.
Oh, yeah.
But you're saying at this point that there's not much that could have been done at this stage.
I think that if there's a flaw on the part of the Canadian government, it was multi-party, and it would be something that they failed to do by passing appropriate laws to put in a proper system, so that a person who's caught in a situation where the person at the plane or at the consulate
Yes.
doesn't think that you're the person who belongs to this passport, where that issue can be resolved.
So obviously we need some kind of an efficiency at this level, and perhaps this is a wake-up call.
Yeah, in a judicial format, not a political one.
Yes, okay, let's go now to Nikki on line 8. Hi, Nikki, you're on the line.
Hi, Christine. I love your show.
Thank you.
I actually have a comment to make about passport photos. I had a disturbing experience many, many years ago when I went to India for the summer with my family. And I just had my photo taken before I went. But we spent 2 months in the summer with the heat and the grime. And I tanned. I mean, I had broken out my skin because of just change in weather.
Yes.
When we were on our way back, in the middle of the night at the Delhi airport, I was standing at the back of the line with my family. Everyone else, the person who was coming through checking passports had no problems with them. But when he got to me, he just kept staring at the photo, staring at me, staring at the photo. I mean, it was, it got
Scary.
uncomfortable.
Scary.
And people don't usually speak back to officials over there.
Yes,
And my
yes.
parents weren't saying anything. And so, well, being Canadian, I, looked back at him. I said, "That's me without a tan." And so, and he sort of
Good
looked
for
at
you.
me. He smirked, and he said, "If you say so," and he sort of flung it back at me. And, it was a very interesting experience because at the time I remember just thinking, jerk. I didn't say it because, of course, no one would say
Smart
anything.
girl.
Like that. But, I mean, no one said anything. Everyone's so afraid of these people. But watching this experience, I always wonder, what if, I wasn't Canadian? What if I didn't have, a Toronto accent? I mean, they didn't have a problem at Heathrow. They didn't have a problem at Pearson. Everyone else thought I looked like my photo. All my family recognized me, I even actually ran into someone, at Pearson Airport and, even at Heathrow, when I was just traveling through. So
I really appreciate you calling in. That's a really interesting story. And hearing her story as well as what happened here, it really wakes you up. I mean, you're left thinking, make sure and try to look as similar as possible to your passport photo, which is pitiful.
Right.
People do go on holidays. They do change over time. They do change their hair color, their hairstyle. I mean, we were joking during the break of how fast my hair grows. 1 minute it's a bob, the next minute it's longer.
Right.
What happens in a case of a passport picture? My goodness.
3 weeks ago, I had a clean face.
There you go. Look at you now, buddy. Let's go to Jerome on line 2. Hi, Jerome. You're on the line.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Jerome.
Yeah, I do have a question here. I mean, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. As a Canadian, I'm very concerned that Canadians basically will go overseas and then something will happen and the government don't step out. I mean, we watch over the news all the time. Whenever an American citizen has a problem overseas, you see this and the government react, and it's just really sad being a Canadian that we can go overseas and something happen. And the government does not have the capability to sort of step in a lot of ways.
I'm going to throw this over to hear what our guests think of that comment, because we've made it clear already that perhaps there needs to be more of an efficient process in place coming from our end. There's nothing you can do about a corrupt system overseas, but the question is what we can do over here. Now, Jerome is saying that if you look at the United States government, if something happens, he's saying to one of their citizens, something is done about it, whereas we don't seem to have that same system. I'd like the two of you to respond to that. Let's start with you, Sam Shear.
Well, I think there was a response. I mean, just looking at the evidence here, I felt like there was a response. My only question was, I mean, of all the evidence that she had given, how come that she was denied? And even when there was a conclusive review, what evidence did they take in? I mean,
Yes.
I just would like to know more about that. Like, what was that process?
Right.
You know?
I think
Yes.
I think too there's some face saving that goes on. I mean, once a person has made a bad decision, to back down from it makes them look even worse. And so I don't doubt for a second that perhaps the person who got her at the plane told the consular official, that's not her. The consular official might even know that person, that, yeah, bud, you're right, we'll show her. And then when the pressure came to bear, he was slow to back down, perhaps didn't grease the wheels of getting her out of the jail, and just had too much pride about the whole thing. And again, that's the problem with politics. You don't mess with a person's identity and make it a political issue, and don't put people into prison based on their religions, presumptions you make about them, or when they're you certainly help them out. When they live in this country and someone wants to take them to another country to process them for a violation that here is nothing but a slap on the wrist. I think it's just wrong.
Let's go now to Ellie on line 7. Hi, Ellie, you're on the line.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Great. It's a little disconcerting to watch what's on TV and trying to talk at the same time, so I'll try not to watch what's on TV. First of all, I'd like to say that I have traveled rather extensively, and to be quite frank, I am more sympathetic to what happened to the person in Kenya. Obviously, I mean, that was a huge issue, whereas I'm sorry, but not to disrespect or show any disrespect to the previous caller who had her passport tossed back, but at least it was tossed back to her, rather than her being held
She
back.
recognizes that, yes.
And to me, I would rather there be that we're cautioning on the side of error, erring on the side of caution than just letting because quite frankly, when 9/11 happened, I was rather uneasy to realize how my friends who had been traveling I mean, I know that they weren't involved in any terroristic activity, but it was quite easy to get into the Canadian border, but obviously that much more difficult to get into the American side. So that's one thing. But as well, I'd like to say that the customs, and I am not a customs officer of any sort, but I have to say they have a tough job. And, yeah, you have the few that give you grief, but at least you deal with the grief and you move on. But to the Aussie credits, when I was traveling...
You're looking at the issue of caution. Ellie, I want to thank you for calling in and sharing that. It's another twist. And we all have to remember, too, that all of the information really hasn't come forth yet. So there are a lot of insinuations going on, from racism to corruption, perhaps in Kenya, whatnot. But all of the information has not come to the surface. I'd like to thank you for calling in and sharing that point of view, Ellie. Let's go now to Kathy on line 8. Hi, Kathy. You're on the line.
Hi, Christine. I just have a quick comment. I just looked at her picture. I have the newspaper here, and I also saw her passport picture. Now, in all honesty, I couldn't recognize her. So maybe she also has responsibility before taking a trip, that she has a photograph that people can recognize her on that particular picture. I mean, that's why we have a passport for it. That's all, Christine.
You got a point there, Kathy. And before we go for a break, I'm going to ask the two of you what you think about that, okay? Now, we were somewhat joking about how scary this could end up. And on one hand, we're being very serious here, because you go on a holiday, you could end up looking very different on the holiday. You may have changed your hairstyle. But Kathy brings up a point. For something like a person's lips, and this is what was highlighted here, it looked completely different. Do you think that there is a sense, or should be a sense, of personal responsibility? I mean, we don't know the facts. You wonder, why would somebody's lips look so entirely different in a photo? Could it just be the way it looked that day? Could it have been that plastic surgery has taken place? And if that is the case, that some kind of a surgery has taken place, well, then obviously a person has to bear some of the onus here.
One of the things I noticed, well, first thing, of course, whenever you get your photo taken in some kind of government office, they say, don't smile, and they wait for the worst possible moment. And
to snap you.
Yeah,
you look like a convict.
You look like a convict. I've tried everything. I always look not like myself, I hope. And one thing I noticed, that this is a very beautiful woman. When she smiles, she has a great big bright smile. And when people smile, their lips aren't necessarily the same conformation as when you're, looking like you're getting a mugshot. So, and plus, she wears her her headwear differently on different occasions. Apparently, in the photo on the passport, she had the headwear pulled right under her chin, whereas in some of the other photos we've seen, it's either tied back or just lying on the shoulders, and that can shape your face quite differently depending on how you're wearing your headwear.
True. I mean, we're looking at every possible scenario here. But once again, it's just a discussion right now, because we really don't know all the facts. Something you wanted to add in before we went for a break, Samshir?
Sure. I mean, I think the way I look at it, I mean, we got to look at maybe the value that the Canadian passport holds. I mean, we all know that in the world, when an individual sees that you're a Canadian citizen, they hold it in revere, like anywhere in Europe you go. And maybe that's an issue here. Maybe they felt that since it could have been a possible forgery, and maybe they just took some extra steps and to make it clear,
Yes.
So
I do feel bad for the woman, because she tried to offer up a lot of other forms of ID, and this really needs to be taken into consideration too. I was going to go for a break first, but we've got Sylvia in BC on line 2, and I don't want to have you waiting there. Sylvia, you're on the line. Go ahead, Sylvia, on line 2 from British Columbia.
Yes. Hello.
Let's go ahead, Sylvia.
I just want to say that I have traveled extensively also, and I think most of the Canadian embassies, and I say most, are just a joke. Paid holidays on tax dollars, because they don't help the people. They seem to like to cause conflict. I don't know if that's what they get off on or what the problem is, but it's really hard on the people. And I have seen many, many, many people that won't come forward and say anything about how they're treated in these embassies. But it's to me, they don't help very much, and they're a joke.
Sylvia, thanks for calling in and expressing your point of view. The question of who's in the embassies. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back after this. Don't go away. Hello again. Welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. We're moving along to topic number 2 now. Take a look at it up on your screen. Concert canceled over ceremonial blade. Now, before we go on to our guests, we've got Jeff on line 4 who has been waiting. Thank you for your patience. Let me know what your point of view is, Jeff, and then we'll give it over to our guests. Jeff, you're on the line.
I have an opinion on this. As far as things are concerned, I think it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's a little blown out of proportion for anyone to think that they could walk into a concert or any sort of public venue, be it a fundraiser, a concert, a religious meeting, anything like that, wearing a weapon. Now, I understand that a Kirpan is a ceremonial blade, but I mean, I'm sure in South Texas people have ceremonial shotguns and you don't see them going to Brooks and Dunn concerts. I certainly couldn't go downtown with Corvell from Nightlight Live and go to a religious meeting with a machete taped to my leg. I mean, there's really no difference in the two. Being somebody who studied mixed martial arts, it's not difficult to see the issue with somebody else being able to disarm you of said knife and certainly cause some grief or some problems for somebody else. It just really depends on the situation, but I really can't see as there being a situation where a knife is okay.
Now, Jeff, you did a great job at articulating your point of view, and you've certainly given all of us, including our audience, a heads up as to what we're talking about with this headline. So keep watching because both of our guests are going to be responding to you, Jeff, because you've been hanging on there since the beginning of our program. Wanted to let you go first. Thanks for calling in. Now, Jeff gave us a sneak preview of this, and what this involves, and you've heard a lot of it from Jeff, is you have an event going on, it had an event going on in Calgary, and it was a Sikh event. It was jam-packed, sold-out venue over an Indian performer there. Now, it got a bit hairy on, of course, opening night, when one fellow with a Kirpan didn't want to give that Kirpan up to security. It got a little hairy because many people who were around that were going into that venue started to get a bit angry about it. So obviously there was a stir that happened as a result of this. And security eventually shut down the entire event. Now, those 2,500 people, well, obviously, they lost their money, lost their tickets. It was a very high-priced event. And now the promoter of that event is threatening a lawsuit. So the big question is, do you side with the Sikh man that did not want to surrender his Kirpan? And we've got to remember, Jeff highlighted, it is a ceremonial item. In fact, the article points out that it's not just ceremonial, it's something that Sikhs are required, according to their religious beliefs, to wear even when they're sleeping. And then you've got to look at the other side too, because this fellow was told to surrender the Kirpan. He didn't want to do it, and it started to get a bit hostile at that point, and they ended up shutting down the event. So whose point of view do you see at that point? It's a difficult one, and it's not the first time that the Kirpan issue has been raised in society as being perhaps an object that could be deemed a weapon. So how do you see this? And that's the question here. Jeff, thank you for your call and expressing your viewpoint. I'm going to start with Samshir on this one, and it relates directly to your belief system. How do you respond to Jeff, Samshir?
I mean, there's a couple of points I'd like to bring up. First, being an Indian event, being a Sikh event, yes. I think essentially it seems to me like it's just a communication breakdown between the management team at Telecenter and the production team, Side Productions.
Yes.
I mean, Gurdas Man, who's the singer in question here, he comes to Canada every couple of years and he visits the same metropolises, yes. Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto. And so this is nothing new. So for me to see this happening, it just seems that maybe the management team wasn't fully aware that Sikhs with ceremonial blades are coming in, and maybe the Side Productions, they make it clear to them that this is a Sikh event. We are going to have Sikhs of individuals with these articles of faith.
I couldn't agree with you more. It seems to be a gross communication breakdown on both sides here. Your response, Paul?
Well, Kirpans don't kill people, people kill people. So that's the first thing. If a person is wearing a Kirpan on the street, so what? I should be allowed to carry a utility knife. They sell them at Canadian Tire, and carry it on my belt. My dad carries one all the time. What's that, son? Let me cut that twine for you. You know, he just loves being helpful with it. So carrying a blade to me is a non-starter, and that's not an issue. To my mind, the issue is the lawsuit, who's right in the lawsuit, and what are the fundamentals.
Yes.
And to my mind, the fundamentals for deciding who gets to stay and who gets to go are rooted in property rights. So
Yes.
whoever the owner of the building is allowed to set whatever rules they want to set, whether they're ridiculous rules, don't wear purple, or don't wear runners, or whatever it might be, or to be more permissive. It's their property, they set the terms, and in this situation, the contract between them and the concert promoter, because there's the venue, then there's the concert promoter, and then there's the people who attend the concert. So the contract was one that says no sharp objects. It didn't say no weapons, just no sharp objects, like sharp metal objects. So there may have been a failure of judgment on the part of the security guards in the application of that rule. However, in the case, in terms of resolving the lawsuit, I think at the end of the day,
you're talking legalities here, and it's their right.
That's technically the rule, and he agreed to those terms. He shouldn't have picked that venue, obviously, and probably won't pick that venue anymore, if he knew, as he did, that the venue was not going to permit sharp metal objects in. I don't think it was a real threat. I don't think the security guards, exercise their judgment appropriately. But in terms of who wins this lawsuit, I think it has to be the property holder, and that is the venue.
Now, both of you bring up really great points here, but I want to return to what Sam Shear said. I think there's really gross negligence on both sides. I mean, if you look at it from the point of view of, if you happen to own a venue and you know that there's a Sikh event, isn't it obvious? I mean, everybody knows about the Kirpan, unless you've been living I don't know where, especially if you are an owner or some kind of an operator of a public event featuring many cultures. The Kirpan has come up in the news again and again for this very same issue. Is it an issue of safety? So obviously the people that own the venue, it should have occurred to them to say, well, look, we don't allow Kirpans on our venue, so how do we intend to deal with this? And obviously, if you happen to be, well, on the other side, having the event, it should occur to you, wait a minute here, my group here, these people wear Kirpans, so how is this going to end up with the venue? There was a gross breakdown here that just should not have taken place to begin with. But how much of this had to do with taking things for granted? For example, the Director of Administration for the World Sikh Organization has said that he's gone to Parliament with his Kirpan and absolutely nothing has taken place. So within the context of our Canadian society and our culture, we know that it's a multicultural society, and the bottom line is you're going to find places that have an issue with it and places that don't. So this is an ongoing issue. It's not about to go away, and I'm curious, how do you deal with this? And I want to hear both of your viewpoints in a second, but let's go to Al on line 6 first. Hi, Al, you're on the line.
Hello?
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make a comment just concerning exactly what you're talking about. The curb hand, okay, would have been, like, say we were going to their country and I had a medical marijuana dispensation from my doctor, right? But I'm in their country, and I wouldn't be allowed to be walking in there with pot. Or if I was from the States, there was some place where you could carry a handgun, and I was in their country, and I say, hey, you can't take my handgun, but I'm in their country, right? And it's the same kind of thing, right? You know, like it's a knife, right? You know, and I would have to respect.
I appreciate and I hear your point of view. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to turn this over to Sam Shear, okay? Because I'd like to hear his response to your concern. Sam Shear?
If I may, I'd just like to put it on pause for a second. You know, being at events and stuff of this nature, I mean, I think this whole situation just got escalated really quickly. I don't think the security guard, being a professional, expressed his tactfulness. You know, if there was a search going to be done, if there was going to be some sort of recovery of this Kirpan, do it in private. It seems like he did it in public area, and then everybody got riled up. Instead of allowing management the proper methodology to issue this, then they would have brought in side productions, then those would have talked behind doors. Okay, we have the situation, how are we going to deal with this? Are we going to allow it, are we going to not? Okay.
There wasn't wisdom used.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, this is not going to stop here. And obviously, I mean, this thing is going to be raised again. The fellow here, the Director of the Administration for the World Sikh Organization, said that he's gone to Parliament and it hasn't been an issue. But the point of the matter is sometimes it's an issue, sometimes it isn't. So how do we deal with this? I mean, is there a way to deal with it once and for all? Because you're going to find different opinions on this. Different organizations have different principles and a different way of exercising what the law might be deemed. Yeah. How do you deal with this ongoing?
I think you stick to the fundamentals, and that is, in a public space, First of all, I think a person, even if this were going to be used in a defensive way, which is historically, I think the symbolism behind wearing the kirpan is that you're defended. You're not offensive. You're defended in case of tyranny. If in case, for example, some government comes in and wants to persecute you for your beliefs. And so, at the same time, I mean, I'm a person who believes that every individual should have the right to protect themselves from being attacked. And so, as far as I'm concerned, if they want to carry an Uzi around in a pant leg, that's fine, as long as they're only using it defensively. Not that anyone would ever advocate that, and I'm in favor of the police.
You're talking about the right to bear arms here now.
Well, that's right.
That's another. So you believe in that, okay?
Well, absolutely, but I don't think that it's the proper role of individuals to go around enforcing the law. I think that's the role for the police. But if as a symbolic matter, especially, come on. I mean, that's just the 5 Ks, I think it's referred to as the beard, the turban, the kirpan, etc. are not only ways of other people identifying you, but of you identifying yourself and reminding yourself of your moral code or your religion, and it also tells everybody else what your moral code and religion are.
So I'm sure, before we go for our break, though, how deep is this rooted in faith to have the kirpan at all times, including when a Sikh man sleeps?
Well, it's part of the 5 Ks. It sort of gives us that identity.
Okay, tell us what the 5 Ks are, first of all, because a lot of people don't realize, okay, it's the kirpan, it's the beard, it's the...
Oh, well, it's unshorn hair. One.
Okay.
Then you have the following comb, which you call the kanga.
Comb, okay.
Right, which is used to keep cleanliness of the hair, of the long hair. Then you have the kirpan, which is the ceremonial blade. And it's usually, the ceremonial blade is usually very small in nature anyways.
Yes.
Then you have the kura, which is the sort of bracelet that you wear. Yes. And finally is the kashera, which is the clean article clothing that you wear underneath your clothes. Yeah.
Okay, and they're very important and rooted in the faith.
Yeah, it's just sort of it was sort of bestowed to us as an identity, like, yeah.
Okay, we're going to go for a break. Right after the break, we'll get straight to you on the phone lines. Don't go away. Okay, thank you. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Now, I'm going to get to you on the phone lines, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to make your point really quick, because I actually want to get to topic 3 today, okay? So let's go to Sukmani on line 1. Hi, Sukmani, you're on the line.
Hi, I just wanted to comment on this. In my opinion, I believe that, every person has the right to defend themselves. But again, on the other side, anything that poses a threat to any individual's safety and security, that should also be taken care of. And rules are rules. If you're not permitted something, I think it shouldn't be permitted.
Sukmani, thanks for calling in with that opinion. Let's go now to Susan on line 6. Hi, Susan, you're on the line.
Hi. How long is this Kirpan, and did the other Sikhs have it also at the party? Or the other thing is, what does it stand for? Was it like to defend yourself against Hindus? Like, was it used as a murder weapon?
Susan, thanks for calling in. We're going to have to make this really quick, Samshir, if you can just tell Susan what this is about.
Well, first part, and they're very small, like I said. It's more like a utility knife. It's used in ceremonies, and it's sort of just, it's a nice sort of article to wear, at the particular ceremony. And secondly, like I said, it was more of sort of giving that identity, back in the day.
Never used as a weapon.
Well, yeah, 'cause if you wanted to use a weapon, you would wear a bigger sword, I would say.
That little tiny thing is just ceremonial.
Exactly.
Don't bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, though, there probably were other people at that same event that would have had the Kirpan. I can't see that not being. But somehow it became an issue with this one fellow. I think from my understanding,
this could have been a particular case where a gentleman probably wore it very visibly.
Yes, it would make sense.
And then the security guard took exception to that, possibly.
Yeah, good point. Let's go now to Pam on line 7. Hi, Pam, you're on the line.
Hi.
Go ahead, Pam, hello. Quickly.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment about the last caller who stated that if we went to their country, and I wanted to make a comment about there are Sikhs that are born in this country, and Canada is our country. It's not a them and us issue, so I just wanted to clarify that. And also, I don't think there has ever been an incident in the media where someone has been attacked by a Kirpan, so that's something to bear in mind also.
Pam, thanks for calling in and making your points. We're going to go now to topic number 3. We don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention and hear what our guests thought about it. Here it is up on the screen. British names on street signs, great in Montreal. Now we're talking about Montreal's East End here, where a city councillor started to get a bit annoyed that there was too much English language creeping in to the fabric of his area. And take, for example, there's a street called Jeffrey Amherst, and it's named after a leader in the British Army that was very much involved in, of course, defeating and gaining Canada. And this fellow is taking offense to this. Plus, there are many street names that are too anglicized for this particular councillor. So he wants to see these names changed, and he wants to see what he calls something more Frenchized into the system. And not everybody is agreeing with this, because these names definitely bear a history. And it was pointed out that, yes, you do have history presented on street signs, and some of it is integrated. You might have some British names, some French names, and so forth. So your opinion on this? Let's start with you, Paul.
Well, Quebec's a British territory, and it is because after the British kicked France off the territory, France said they would rather have some islands than have Canada. They actually chose.
You're irritating separatists here. Really big.
Literally, France said, we don't want Canada. We want the islands instead. We have these missing links, though, that hang around in Quebec still, who, it's not so much important that they want to get rid of Amherst's name. It's rather that they want to impose something else instead. And the one thing they want to impose, always, is a French name, a French culture, a French food, a French dress, a French flower. It's collectivism, it's base tribalism, it's against the idea that every individual, regardless of where they live, has their own mind. They can prefer their own tastes, music, and everything else. This idea that he refers to the English as the English, like we're some big collective, and the French. Well, you know what? Amherst doesn't define me. I'm not related to him, and he doesn't take anything from me.
There's still a bit of enmity, though, between the two charter groups that you see still existing in society. I mean, there have even been arguments about Canada even paying the money to have both interpretations of French and English on labels. This is something ongoing across Canada, and it's, yes.
To the extent that English-speaking people engage in this kind of nonsense, they're equally to blame. The idea is we aren't the English and the French. We're a bunch of Canadian individuals, each of whom have preferences. And these people who want to push a culture on us and say, you're French and you belong to our tribe, are the missing links in this society. People who don't want to think, all they want is for everyone to act the same way, follow the same rules, be the same, and they are the trouble, whether they're French or English or anything else.
Okay, Sam Shear, your thoughts on this one?
I mean, for me, as I grew up in high school here, I always enjoyed both cultures.
Yes.
I mean, the English and the French. And I always enjoyed it when I went to like different cities and see both signs. I would think that there's no need for it to be all one sign. I mean, we come from two different cultures. Canada has two official languages. And if it's street signs, then okay, make them an English sign and a French sign then. You know.
And in this area, there are both sides.
Yeah.
And it's a history here that's being tampered with. And I know that there are those that will say, well, why keep showing and parading the English side of it? But both are here. And you call this, you think it's stirring up trouble?
It's always stirring up trouble. These
Now, what's your prediction? Do you think this proposal is going to go through?
No, I think he's a backwards little man who's going to have his proposal go down in flames.
Okay, and we're going to have to close on that point because we're out of time for today. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have. See you again next time. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.